So we're picking up on chapter 4, and I'm looking specifically from your book, pages 72 to 78, which is the end of the chapter. And in this section, this is where Nick is speaking with Jordan Baker after he's been and had lunch with Maya Wolsheim and Gatsby in New York. So it's one October day in 1917, and it's Jordan Baker who's retelling the story of Daisy's youth and how she met Gatsby. Now, this particular discussion has been organised by Gatsby himself so that he can use Nick as a conduit to get to Daisy. We learn a little bit about Jordan in this particular section. She describes what she had on. For example, I had on shoes from England with rubber knobs and soles that bit into the soft ground. She talks about her new plaid skirt, and she also talks about the red, white and blue banners in front of all those houses. So we're talking about the South, a very patriotic South from where she came. The largest banner belongs to Daisy Fay's house, so you get a sense that Daisy's family is a patriotic family from the South, and she's obviously from a very wealthy family. She's 18 years old in 1917, so if you're looking for detail, that's there. And she's 2 years older than Jordan. So it's interesting to understand Jordan, who hangs out with a girl who's older than her. She notes that Jordan is dressed in white, which is references to clothing and obviously symbolic. She's dressed in the outfit of a golfer, someone who plays games, whereas Daisy is the debutante in white. She has the little white roadster, her car, so that reference to mobility again. And all day long the telephone rang. And remember, we talked about the metallic guest, the fifth guest in the first chapter, this reference to the telephone and modernity having an impact on family values and certainly on who appears in the lives of the characters. Camp Taylor is where Gatsby is stationed, and it certainly is where Daisy starts to meet young men. If I just jump down a little bit lower, we learn how Jordan feels to belong to Daisy's clan. She tells Nick that she was flattered about Daisy wanting to engage with her because she's one of the older girls. She tries to connect with her in terms of asking her if she's going to be involved in doing work for the Red Cross for the war effort. And we learn about Jay Gatsby, who was one of the officers who was had taken a fancy to Daisy. That was 1917. By the next year I had a few beaux myself and I began to play tournaments, so I didn't see Daisy very often. She went with a slightly older crowd, and that's been said a number of times, this idea that Jordan felt incredibly privileged to engage in any sort of association with Daisy. And remember, Jordan has maintained that relationship for her own benefit. Wild rumours were circulating about her, how her mother found her packing a bag one winter night to go to New York and say goodbye to a soldier who was going overseas. And we assume here the soldier she was saying goodbye to on that winter night was Gatsby. So it was a real love affair. She was effectually prevented, but she wasn't on speaking terms with her family for several weeks. So we know that while it may seem a little bit dramatic, it certainly didn't consume Daisy's life for terribly long. If we move forward down here a little bit further, After that, she didn't play around with soldiers anymore, but only a few flat-footed, short-sighted men in town who couldn't get into the army at all. So interestingly, though she gave up on her army men, she certainly didn't give up with her flirtations, and Gatsby was one of many. She had her debut after the armistice, and in February she was presumably engaged to a man from New Orleans. In June, though, she marries Tom Buchanan of Chicago. This is an often quoted line, with more pomp and circumstance than Louisville ever knew before. He came down with 100 people in 4 private cars and hired this whole floor of this hotel, which is testament to his wealth that is far beyond anyone in the area. These pearls, worth millions by today's standard, are a feature and a symbol of his wealth. Even though Jordan has played down her relationship a little bit, she was the bridesmaid. This scene here, where Daisy has a bath and she's in her flowered dress, and she ends up in the bath, I beg your pardon, but she drank a bottle of Sauterne, and she had become drunk as a monkey, and she's in her flowered dress, where there's a reference to that symbol again, and she says she's never drunk before, and in her hand she has a letter from Gatsby, and she's decided she wants to return the pearls to Tom because she's not going to marry him. In this line, she says that it was in a wet ball and it was coming to pieces like snow, that the memory of this great romance was melting away. They gave her spirits of ammonia, they put ice on her forehead, they put her back into her dress, and then the pearls were back on her neck, and the incident was over, and she marries Tom Buchanan at 5 o'clock the next day. They go on their honeymoon to the South Seas. Often people say that they went to Europe, but that's not actually the case. Jordan sees them in Santa Barbara, and she says here, "I've never seen a girl so mad about her husband." If he left the room for a minute, she'd look around uneasily and say, "Where's he gone?" Now, I'm not sure that this madness and this uneasiness and the abstracted expression here that Jordan refers to are the actions of a new wife keen for her husband to return, more so that she is concerned that he has taken himself off and perhaps finding himself engaged with other women. When he is there, she does delight in his presence, though. Unfathomable delight when he is there. That was in August. They married in June. This is in August. A week after I left Santa Barbara, Tom ran into a wagon on the Ventura Road and ripped off the front wheel of his car. So there's that idea of mobility and the privacy that vehicles offered the population, and it certainly allows Tom to cavort with other young girls. Notice the word girl here and not woman. Her arm was broken and she was one of the chambermaids. So him being associated with Myrtle in the novel is not the first time that he has found himself with women from lesser privileged positions than himself. By April, Daisy has had a little girl and they've gone to France. So they've moved. And this idea of moving away from scandal becomes part of the theme of Daisy's life. They moved with a fast crowd, which tells you the sort of lifestyle that they're living. But she came out with an absolute perfect reputation, perhaps because she doesn't drink. It's a great advantage not to drink amongst hard-drinking people. You can hold your tongue, and moreover, you can time any irregularity of your own so that everybody else is so blind they do not see or care. I think this is a really interesting line. I'm sure you guys could draw a lot of conclusions from it. This idea of the euphemism of irregularity gives you insight into Daisy's ability to perhaps have other relationships, and also this idea of blindness is a popular theme in the novel. The ideas of being able to see. You've got the eyes of T.J. Eckleburg, you've got the eyes of owl eyes, and you've got this idea of blindness and not seeing the truth, which we see in Gatsby as well. Gatsby preferring to be blind and not acknowledging the truth of Daisy. Perhaps Daisy never went in for amour at all, and yet there's something in that voice of hers. Okay, and now that reference is also one that Gatsby observes of Daisy. 6 weeks ago, she hears the name of Gatsby for the first time in years, and she described him as "What Gatsby?" which is interesting. Not that were there other Gatsbys in her life? Was he merely a symbol of the sort of man who had admired her desperately, and in her vanity she was seeking out these people? Or was she actually specifically talking about Gatsby, the character of her past? Is an interesting debate that people have over that line. I was half asleep. She said in the strangest voice that it must be the man she used to know. It wasn't until then that I connected this Gatsby with the officer in her white car. Now, when Jordan had finished telling all this, we had left the plaza for half an hour. And there's a reference. I'm just going to jump a little bit. And he says, "Oh, isn't it?" Nick says to her, "Isn't it a strange coincidence?" And here Jordan tells us it's not a coincidence at all, which gives us insight into game playing, and that things are deliberate, and then we make moves and choices, much like Gatsby has made moves and choices to be seen by Daisy. Daisy too will go on and play her game as well. Now, then it had not been merely the stars to which he had aspired on that June night. Sorry, I can't highlight here. Then it had not been merely the stars to which he had aspired on that June night. This idea of a twinkling future, something beyond his grasp. He came alive to me, delivered suddenly from the womb of his purposeless splendour. Suddenly, these stars become his navigation point, and that is the role of the green light at the end of Daisy's doll. We find out that Gatsby wants Nick to organise for Daisy to come over, and this is a lovely line. "The modesty of the demand shook me." He had waited 5 years and bought a mansion where he dispensed starlight to casual moths, and we've read that line before, so that he could come over some afternoon to a stranger's garden. He's also afraid that he's left this relationship too long and his meeting with Daisy too long. He wants her to see his house, to show her that he has money now and he's worthy of her, and that he can realize his dream in some way by meeting her again.